how much time do you spend working on content versus your actual business?
I would say percentage wise, I spend 70% of the time working on the actual business and 30% on content. Maybe even that number might even be more like 80/20. If I
Oh,
was to put an actual like number on it, the amount of time I spend creating content each week is less than 2 hours, I would say, less than 2 hours a week. Of course, that changes if you include podcasts as part of the content, because podcasts where I'm interviewing other people or doing my own solo show, like those hours definitely add up. But you know, that's something that's most people wouldn't consider content, or it's just a kind of content most people don't do. So if you add on podcasts, it might be more like 4 or 5 hours a week. But without podcasts, just purely social media content, I'd say about 2 hours a week, and I spend the rest of my time just working on the business.
wait. So according to that ratio, you work 10 hours a week.
I posted this on my story
Mhm.
a few weeks ago, and I said that I work 10, and my wife said, "No, you probably work more like 15 to 20." And so 15 to 20 might be more accurate if you include like meeting times and like
Mhm.
answering emails and stuff like that. But like truly focused, dedicated work time is probably 15 at most 20 hours a week. And it definitely varies. I mean, there were weeks like last week where I maybe only had a couple hours of work for the whole week. Whereas 3 weeks ago, we were like in the middle of a launch and I had like, closer to 40 hours in a week. So it really
Oh,
varies. But I'd say maybe roughly 20
oh,
hours
that's
and
crazy.
2 hours on creating social media content.
So the rest of the time, are you like just doing personal stuff? Are you just hanging out?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, work life balance is huge for me, and it's something that um, I've ebbed and flowed with. It's something that I haven't like had nailed down since day one. And even like I said, 3 weeks ago, I was working a lot more, and I was waking up and heading straight to the office. Whereas usually I spend the first few hours of my day not working at all. Like I get up,
Mhm.
I check in on Pokemon Go first thing of the day. I'm gonna head to the gym. I'm gonna like get a workout in for an hour or two. I'm gonna come home, shower. Usually, most days, like my typical scenario is I don't start working until around 11. Like I might check an email here or there or see if there's any important messages from the team first thing in the morning, but I don't actually start working until around 11 a.m. And then I have a hard stop at about 5 p.m. every single day. So unless there's like a live training or some special circumstance where I have to work after 5 p.m., when it hits 5 p.m., I am done. And that means like literally I am done. I don't edit content. I don't check email. The most I'll do is if my assistant texts me and is like, hey, there's this thing that really needs your attention, I might check really quick. But for the most part, after 5 p.m., I'm done for the day. I'm enjoying time with my wife and our bird and our two dogs, and I'm watching Netflix and I'm just enjoying life. And I have a lot of interests and passions and hobbies outside of social media. And so it's really important to me that those things take priority over creating another reel.
Yeah. That's amazing. Like when you look at people's content and stuff like that, you would think like, oh, this person is probably so busy, and like a lot of people say that about me too. But when I actually talk to a lot of successful people, they don't work as much as
Yeah.
like the people who are grinding out and like just like still having a hard time.
Hmm.
I guess. Do you think it's
Totally.
about working on the right things? Like how
I
that's
I do. I think there's a few things. I think there it is about working on the right things, but I think before you even get to the stage, like the stage where I'm at now, I recognize that there were a few years there where the balance was not balanced. The balance was very much. It was especially when I was like a college athlete. It was really not much of a social life. It was either I was at football practice, I was at class, or I was in my room at my apartment and I was working. Like I was doing live trainings, I was filming courses, I was creating content. And so I think when we think of balance, oftentimes people think it has to be 50-50, and I think nothing is ever going to be 50-50. There's never going to be that perfect balance. And even if you want things to be balanced like day to day or week to week, it might not seem that way. Again, like 3 weeks ago, it was not balanced. It was much
Mhm,
heavier
mhm,
work wise. Last week was much heavier, like personal wise. I wasn't doing as much
mhm,
work. And I think it's important when you zoom all the way out and you look at like my last 7 years of being a business owner, there was a few years there where it was working really, really hard and grinding and not as much social life and not as much free time and not as much hobbies. And then there are times where I've taken months off and still kept up with the business and still been the
Mhm.
CEO, but I've taken months off of creating content. And so
Mhm.
it's important to remember that balance doesn't always have to be within this 24-hour time frame. Like it can be
Mhm.
over a 24-month time frame. That's when balance is more important, I think, because I
Yeah.
think one imbalanced day isn't going to lead to burnout, but multiple imbalanced months might. So I think that's important. I also think having a team is hugely important. And oftentimes I will hear people kind of like poo poo anything that, when I'm talking about like my time spent or how much content I create. And they'll be like, oh, yeah, well, you have a team. And I definitely rely on my team heavily. And I think that that's a huge um, benefit that any entrepreneur, any content creator can have is a team. And I think people have misconceptions around being able to afford a team and having help and hiring people. The first person I hired was someone who started working with me when I was 19 years old. And I was paying them like a super low rate. It was a great rate for their country, but like they were outside of the US. For US rates, it would have been a really low rate. And it was what I could afford at that time. But it was through hiring that first person that I realized, oh, it's not that scary. Oh, I
Mhm.
can delegate. Oh, I can outsource and give these tasks to other people, which then free me up to do other things. And there's this really great book called Who Not How, and I think that that's a book I would recommend for any entrepreneur or any content creator listening. It was a book that I read for the first time, I think like 2 or 3 years ago. And essentially, like the summary of the book, the thesis is when you have a big goal or a big dream or something you want to achieve, instead of asking yourself, how am I going to get there? Ask yourself, who is going to help me get there? And so, one of the big ways that I'm able to work as little as I do is because I have a personal team of 5 people who are helping me. And if we look at the Instaclub Hub, which is my business, we have 25 people on that team
Mhm.
working just on the Instaclub Hub membership. That's a pretty big team. And so, it's thanks to all those people that I'm
Mhm.
able to um, have this air quotes balance that I have.
Yeah. So when I look at your content is very personal because it's you on
Mhm.
video. uh,
Yeah.
so what part of your content creation do you like delegate versus you do yourself? Like, do you know what I
Great question. Yeah. So I do all of my ideation. So I come up with all my ideas myself. I come up with all of my scripts, which I don't usually write like full scripts. I usually just do bullet points for what I want to say, and then I kind of free flow it. So I do that myself, and then I film myself. So it's if I'm the one actually like pressing record, pressing start and stop, and that's really where it ends for me. Once I'm done recording, that's when I pass it off to an editor. So I have an editor on my team who she edits about 16 reels per month for me. Of course, I'm posting more than 16. So the rest, I do edit some myself, especially if they're like a 4-second reel or like a sound bite reel or a lip sync or a dance or whatever. Like I can edit that myself. It takes 10 seconds. So I don't need to tap on her for that. But for my direct to camera stuff, the more educational reels and short form videos, she is editing those. And then I do write the captions myself, but I'm not a long captions guy. So my
mean?
captions are usually just like a sentence or two, and that's good enough for me. Stories are all me. And basically the same flow is what I use for like podcasts and YouTube videos is I come up with the title, the script, the outline, I film it, but then I pass it off to our podcast editor and our YouTube editor who can actually like chop it up and make it look presentable for the
Got
platform.
it. Yeah, that's the time consuming part anyway. And like,
Absolutely.
uh, so if you're spending like just a couple of hours a week, like, do you think in the beginning it was also like that, or is it just because you've been doing it for so long you can just get it down to like the core of it?
I think it's a little bit of both. I really do. I think that when I was first getting started, um, the thoroughness in which I planned content and the thoroughness, especially of which I planned podcast videos and YouTubes, was a lot more. It was a lot more time researching, a lot more time writing, even like more thought out scripts rather than just bullet points and outlines, planning things and editing things, especially when I was editing things myself. I will say pretty early on, especially for YouTube and podcast, I started hiring an editor and having people edit those longer form pieces of content for me. I brought on my short form video editor about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago now. And that was something that I was reluctant to give up because I was like, it's a 30-second video. It's not that long. Like I can do it myself. I want my own personal touch, but it has been so freeing to be able to have 16 videos a month done for me rather than having to edit those myself. But yeah, it definitely has been a process over time of speeding it up and learning like what works for me. Because I know like when I talk to people, some people love batching, some people love creating every single day, some people love creating once a month or once a week. And so I think it's different for everyone. And what works for me, it might not work for everyone else, but what works for me is like breaking it down into separate chunks. So I have a chunk of time where I am just writing out outlines and I'm just writing ideas. I have another chunk of time where I'm filming and recording. Like yesterday, I brought 3 changes of shirts to this office and I recorded like a dozen videos and just kept changing shirts so it looks like it's a different day. And I did that because I knew like my voice was good that day and I, was looking good on camera. I was feeling confident. I was feeling no mental brain fog. And so I was like, I'm going to record a bunch today. So I kind of break up my content creation into those separate chunks.
That's what you just said is so important. Like I definitely used to downplay like the importance of being in a good mindset, like
Mm-hmm.
well slept, well rested, and like.
Yeah.
But I started to notice that whenever I'm like, because I go through these ups and downs, like periods where I'm like on a high versus low, and when I'm on the high, like the way I come up on video, even in my community and everything is so different, and people can tell the difference.
Mm-hmm.
Versus like when I'm on the low, I'm always tired, things like that. People can see that I'm groggy or
Yeah.
things like that.
Definitely. Definitely.
You also doing so. One of the things I notice about you is you reply, and maybe not to everyone, but
Mm-hmm.
when I comment on your stuff and stuff, you've definitely replied, and also on threads. So are you counting the engagement time into the content time, or is
So
that separate?
yeah, so that's a tough one, is because so I can first and foremost say like Instagram and replying to DMs and comments. One of the first things I outsourced as I started to grow on Instagram was what I call my community management. So as soon as I hit like maybe 80,000 followers on Instagram, I realized that I was getting too many DMs and comments to keep up with. Yet at the same time, it was really important for me to make sure that everyone felt seen and heard and validated. Like if someone is taking even 3 seconds out of their day to leave a laugh emoji, I want to make sure that that energy is reciprocated so that they feel like they have a place in this community and they feel that much more willing to come back in the future because when they laughed in the past, they were seen, they were heard, they were responded to. And so I hired someone back in 2020 to basically respond to comments and respond to direct messages for me. It's really important that like that number gets to 0. I hate when I see that I have like 40 unread direct messages. I like getting that number to 0. And so we do that together, and it's very much both of us. So sometimes it's her. She works, I believe, about 20 hours a week just responding to comments. Obviously, that's something that I have her working 20 hours a week because I have that much work for her to do. I have that many comments and DMs for her to respond to. Someone who maybe doesn't get as much engagement might not have to spend 20 hours a week engaging. I do spend a few hours myself just because it's important, but it's tough to differentiate between like when am I engaging and that's like quote unquote for the business, or it's like working, and when am I just engaging for fun? Because I can open Instagram and watch a post that one of my friends made and then watch a video about snowboarding, which is like purely my entertainment, and then watch like a travel tip for Japan, and I'm like, oh, that's exciting, I'm going to save that. And then I see like a business post, and so maybe I engage with it there. So maybe it's like 3 seconds, but do I count that whole time? It's tough. And same with threads is all me. But threads is more of something that I kind of treat as just like a for fun type of thing. I'll open threads, I'll scroll for a minute or two and just see what everyone's talking about, see what funny jokes are on threads. It's fun on threads right now because they haven't rolled out ads yet. And so it's kind of like a, more authentic platform. And so I like to just pop on threads and maybe engage, respond to a couple messages here or there, respond to people who might have tagged me and things. But again, it's tough to like really define like, when does it become working? When does it become just kind of being
Yeah,
social and being a normal human who's scrolling on social media?
yeah, yeah. I get that because like I actually have fun commenting and replying. I like
Yeah.
if I don't have anything interesting to say, like I wouldn't comment. I'll just double tap or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So for people who are like kind of pressed for time, right? They don't have that much time. would you say they should spend time on engagement or just forget that part?
Yeah, I think that if you're short on time, I think engagement is something that you can kind of put on the back burner. I think if you're short on time, I would spend that time that you do have creating, because ultimately it's what you create that will be seen by other people. It's what you create that will help you grow. It's what you create that will create a community. It's what you create that will help grow the business. Engagement is important. Being social is important. It's important for building a community, for building trust and relationships. But if you only have, let's say, 30 minutes a day, I would much rather have you spend 30 minutes creating a post than spend 30 minutes engaging with people and responding to comments and responding to messages. Ideally, maybe you could spend 25 minutes creating the post and then spend like at least 5 minutes engaging with people. But if you really have to choose one or the other, I'd much rather have someone create than just engage.
Yeah. Also, would you recommend batching that content? Like, I used to do it like that one by one, but
Uh-huh.
and I was very
So
anti like no, but I found
yeah,
that
I
like
used to
if I go ahead,
go for it.
I
Go for it.
found
Yeah,
that
no,
when
I
I
would
do it
agree.
all in one day, it's like the content is actually better because like on that day I'm in the content mindset and like
Yeah.
once you have ideas, more ideas flow and things like that.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And that's exactly what I used to do is I used to do one a day. And when I first started growing on Instagram, I would wake up and maybe I'd have like a couple reels saved in my drafts, but for the most part it was like wake up, what am I going to post today? I have no idea. Like I'm going to just scroll through some audios, and this was back in 2021, so no one was really doing direct to camera yet. It was just lip syncs and popular trending audios and trending sounds and whatnot. So I was just like, what's trending today? What's popular? And what can I create? At most, I would make it like the night before and then post it in the morning, but I was never batching. And that time, looking back on it, I realized how anxiety filled and how stressful that was, because I was constantly having to have this like pressure of I have to do this rather than, hey, I have created content for the next 3 weeks. If I post today, great. That's an extra post that I've made, but I don't have to. Like, for example, today, this morning, Instagram broke some news and I was very quickly like, I'm going to make a post about it. But it was because I had the time to, I wanted to. I was like, I'll make a post about this news. But I didn't have to make a post about the news because I already had a post that was posted 3 hours before, and I already have a post that's scheduled 2 hours from now. So being in that place of doing things because you want to, or because you can, or because you're inspired is very different than forcing yourself because you have to. So yeah, now I do batch. I've tried all the different methods. I've tried, a month's worth of content in 1 hour. I've tried doing this week's content in like a day. And that's usually what works best for me, is usually like every Monday, or at least early on in the week, I'll film a bunch of content, and that will usually be my content for like 2 weeks from now. So by the time I get it back from my editor, it's about 2 or 3 weeks later that I can actually post that stuff.
Yeah. That's really interesting. The fact about like wanting to do it versus like having to do it. That mindset is like, because the content comes out different too. Like when you want to do something, the
Mm-hmm.
content is also just better.
Yeah,
Uh,
absolutely.
so if you, and this might be a little bit different topic, if you were to start from scratch now, like zero
Yeah.
followers and no business, no nothing, how would you spend your first 3 months?
Yeah, such a great question. And I've actually done this a few times personally in the last few months with starting some accounts from zero that I haven't promoted on my own personal account. And I actually, just as a fun passion side project, I helped out a few of my friends who wanted to like grow their own accounts. And so this is exactly what I had them do. And that's exactly what I would do for myself, which is first and foremost, let's define our niche. And niche has a million different definitions, but the way I talk about it is the who and the what. So who are you talking to? Like who is that demographic? Who's your ideal follower? What are their values, their beliefs, their interests, their problems? That's a really big one, is the things that they're struggling with. Getting crystal clear on that. And the what. So what are you going to be talking to them about? What's the topic? What's the area of expertise? What's the thing that you're helping them with? Getting really clear on your niche. For some people, that might like come to them already. They already know who it is.
Mhm.
For some people, they might have to experiment. They might have to watch some YouTube videos and create some TikToks and post on Instagram and just experiment to figure out like what do they really want to do. For some people, it might just be getting serious, looking in the mirror and like thinking about it for a little bit. But once they have that niche, that's kind of the foundation. That's step one. That's what your Instagram following is built off of. Then we'll set up the profile. You know, we can get lost in the weeds of all the like little settings and little tips I could give for the profile. But essentially, we want to have a username that makes sense. If it's a personal brand, we want your personal name. We want a profile picture that makes sense, right? I've seen way too many logos that are like shrunk down super small and people put them in their profile picture. And it's like, no one can read that. It should be big and bold, right? Like Gatorade isn't going to put the full word Gatorade. They're just going to put the G with the lightning bolt, right? And so really simplifying the logo or the profile picture. And then there's this big bold line right below your profile picture that's known as your name on Instagram. And because it's known as your name, most people just put their name.
Mm.
So that's where I would have people put in like searchable keywords instead of their name. So on my line, it says like Instagram growth coach. That way it's searchable. People can find you if they're searching for that term. Then the bio itself, 4 lines or less, basically being as concise as possible, articulating why the heck should someone follow you. And then I would get to posting. So from that point for the next 90 days, I would not pick my head up from the table. I would just keep posting and posting and posting and not caring about engagement or growth or anything like that yet, because the algorithm has to figure out who you are. The algorithm has to figure out who is interested in your posts. Your posts need time to enter into the market. And it is an uphill battle at first, because if someone clicks on your page and they're considering following you, but they see that you have 7 followers, there's like red flags in their head. Like, why does this person not have more followers? Did this person just start over? Like, what's going on here? And so, like, it's very easy to become a fan of someone who's got 1 million followers. It's much tougher to become a follower of someone who's got 1 follower, right? And so it is an uphill battle at first, but keep staying consistent. And I think that if you can stay consistent, and let's define that as 1 post a day, just for argument's sake, 1 post a day for those 90 days, then at the end of 90 days, you're not going to have 1 million followers, but you should at least have probably a couple hundred followers, at least maybe like 150 followers. And that will be enough that the snowball is now rolling. It's not like the base of the snowman yet, but the snowball is rolling. It's collecting snow. It's picking up speed and it's rolling downhill. So then it's just a matter of staying consistent. And then hopefully at that point, you have some systems in place so that you don't have to spend all your time creating content, and you can spend more time actually engaging with the community and building the community and engaging with your followers.
Wow. So you just said after 3 months of posting every day, couple hundred followers. That's like, that's shocking for me to hear, because when you see those videos, YouTube videos and stuff, like people like get 10,000 followers in 3 months and things like that.
Yeah. And I mean,
You're
it's
saying you don't even
possible.
need that. Yeah.
No, I don't think you do. And I also think it's important to set realistic expectations. I think it's possible. You could have a video go viral, like your 3rd video could go viral. And that's one of the really interesting things, is that when you do start a new account, oftentimes one of, if not all of, your first 5 reels will do very well. Like they will reach thousands of people. And that's not because they're going viral. That's not because they're just that great. It's because the algorithm is like, who is this person? What is this account? Like, who would be interested? And so the algorithm has to show you to a lot of people to get a bigger sample size. And so I oftentimes get messages from people who are like, when I first started, I was getting thousands of views and I'm only getting a couple hundred. It's like, well, yeah, because when you first started, the algorithm had to figure out who the heck would be interested in this. And now they found that group. So now they're only showing it to that group. So like I was saying, it's totally possible that one of your first reels goes big time viral and it reaches hundreds of thousands or millions of people, and you do blow up overnight. Like that absolutely does happen. But the more realistic thing, the more realistic expectation for people to have is that if you're posting from day 0 to day 90, you're probably going to have a couple hundred followers at the end of day 90. And it's going to be a slow and steady growth rather than a viral exponential 10,000 followers in a month type of growth.
So hearing that, I would imagine most people are going to be like, Brock, I've been posting for like, last 3 months, and then I only have a couple hundred followers, and what am I supposed to do? Like, what would you say to somebody like that at that point, from the 3 months mark point?
Yeah. So there's this like super cheesy meme that I've seen everywhere. Like it's one of those classic memes that's been around since the dawn of time. And there's like these 2 guys, and they're like miners. They have pickaxes and they're mining underground. And the one guy is like turning, he's walking away, back down his tunnel that he just dug, and his pickaxe is over his shoulder, and he's like all sad. And then the other guy is still pickaxing, and you can see that he's like one strike of the axe away from this like giant pile of gold or diamonds or whatever. And as cheesy as that is, and as cliche as that illustration is, and I hope everyone can kind of picture it based off what I just described, that's really how it is on Instagram. It's the people who give up, who are one post away, or who are one story away, or one reel away, whatever, from growing their account, from blowing up. It's the people who are always focused on how long is this going to take, that end up not having success, because they're not focused on pouring into their community and creating value and improving their content. They're focused on getting to the end result. How long is this going to take, right? And so I think shifting that mindset is really, really tough to do, but it's really necessary, because you never know. You could be your first ever reel goes viral and you got 10,000 followers in a day. It might be your 101st reel, but it will take time. And I think that people's their patience has really shrunk over the last few years, and their patience for waiting for results has really shrunk. But if you think about it, there's the 10,000 hour rule. It takes decades to become an expert in something. It takes years and years of practice to become elite at most things, whether you're playing piano or you're skiing or you're becoming a singer, like whatever that thing is, it takes decades. But on Instagram, it's not going to take decades. For some reason, though, we think it's going to take 10 minutes, or we think it's going to take a couple days. It's not going to take decades, but it's also not going to take a couple minutes. Like, it will take probably a few months. It might take a year or two. If you're consistently posting for 2 years and you don't see results, then we have a problem. If you're consistently posting for a year and you don't see any results, we probably might have a problem. But if you're posting for like a month or 2 or 3 months consistently and you're not seeing results, the problem is not with your content, probably. The problem probably isn't with your stuff that you're posting, your bio, your niche, whatever. The problem is probably just with your expectations and with the timeline that you have in your head.
Yeah, I like what you said about how that means they're focusing on the wrong thing, like the outcome. And I do also think that if you just focus on the process and getting better at content creation or something like that, the content also is actually better too. Therefore, you are
Literally,
going to
yes.
get the.
Yes.
So you mentioned something about like if you've been posting for a year or 2 years. So I have seen people like that who have been consistent for a year or 2 years. They're not growing, and I'm just like, "Ugh, what are you doing? Like, so what's happening there usually for those people? You think?
Yeah, so I will say there are exceptions. There's exceptions to every rule. I interviewed
Yeah.
someone on my podcast recently who they were posting for like 3 or 4 years before they had any real growth or success. And it's tough for me to say because I didn't look back at what they were doing for those first 3 or 4 years. But there are definitely accounts that after a couple of years, then they do start growing. But I think it's probably because that they have changed something in their content. They have improved their hooks. They have changed the way that they do storytelling. They have improved their editing. And ultimately, it is that quality, those changes to the quality that are going to make the difference in your content. Like at the end of the day, if you're posting bad content, if your videos aren't concise, if they're not well edited and well lit with good audio, people aren't going to engage. There are exceptions. There are plenty of videos that go viral that break all those rules that I just said. But generally speaking, if you're improving the quality of your content, then that's going to be the difference maker. And that's also probably the reason that you're not seeing success earlier is just because of something with the content, something with the way it's structured or presented.
Yeah, that's exactly how I feel. Because when I'll look back at the content, I'm like, dude, you're doing the exact same thing every day. Like, if something's not
Yeah.
working for 6 months, like, you know what I mean? So, regarding that, how do you make those incremental upgrades? Do you check analytics insights? How do you measure that and know what to improve?
Yeah, so I think that there's different factors that you can look at within the content. So if you're not getting any views, like just no one is watching your reels to begin with, it's probably an issue with the hook. And I say reels, but it also could be, your carousels, the first slide of the carousel, or even your photo. If like what is the first slide, or if you post like a graphic with like text, lots of text on it, an infographic. What does the headline say of that infographic? The hook is usually what most heavily equates to views. So yes, engagement helps you get more views, but you're not going to get engagement if people aren't watching in the first place. So I would really put most of your energy and your time and your effort into
Mhm.
improving the hook. In fact, I usually say, like, if you're to divide up your time that you spend creating a post, spend about 80% of the time just thinking about and improving the hook, because that's really, if you have a good enough hook, people will watch the rest of the video, even if the rest of the video isn't that great,
Mhm.
because the hook was that strong. So I'd really focus in on the hook. The call to action is usually what most directly leads to engagement. So improving your call to action is the direct correlation. It directly correlates to what people are or are not doing. So if you say,
Mhm.
oh, no one ever comments on my posts,
Mhm.
well, are your posts, first and foremost, before we even get to the call to action, are your posts the type of posts that are going to generate comments anyways? Like, are they the type of things that are going to get someone talking? Or did you just post a super educational tutorial that no one's really going to talk about, but they're all going to save? Like, knowing the mindset of your follower when they're consuming your post is really important. And it takes time to figure that out. But I think most people, when they think about it, they're actually going to realize that they probably have an idea, right? Like I just gave that example. Educational tutorial, probably going to get saved. Really
Mhm.
pretty or funny video, probably going to get likes. Something that's maybe a little controversial, thought provoking, something that poses a question, that's going to get more comments,
Mhm.
right? And so if your content is going to create a certain form of engagement, then ask for that form of engagement. Like, straight up ask for it. But then there are ways that you can improve your call to action. So instead of just saying, save this post, you could give them a reason why.
Mhm.
Save this post if you found it valuable. You could even keep going. Save this post if you found it valuable, so that you can refer back to this post in the future. Now you're giving people the full thought in their brain as to why they should engage with the post.
Mhm.
If you're not growing your following, but you're getting decent views, then the issue might be that your posts aren't all consistently related to your niche. Like, maybe you have one post about this interest, another post about this interest, and they're kind of all over the place. So, like, yeah, they're getting great views, but when someone looks at your page, they can't tell if you're a Chinese restaurant, if you do taxes, or if you're a snowboarder. Like, there's just too much going on here. So they're not going to follow. And along those same lines, maybe if they look at your bio and they can't clearly tell what you do or why they should follow you, they're not going to follow. Like, if your bio is filled with a bunch of cliches, like, I hope you live your best life and I
Mhm.
help people discover their dreams, like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, I
Yeah.
have a problem that I need to save money on my taxes and I live in the state of Utah. So, like, when I find
Mhm.
someone whose bio says, I help small business owners who live in Utah save money on taxes, I'm like, okay, I'm following that
Mhm.
person, right? So clearly
It's so
articulating in your
obvious, but
bio. Yeah. It's
like
obvious
as you're
when
saying
when I
it.
say it, but when people are writing their bio, they don't think about it. They're like, oh, I want to put these
Yeah.
emojis and I want to, have this cliche, live your best life expression. But it's like, that's not what people want. People want, just
Yeah.
tell me what you can do for me. Listen, I have
Yeah.
3 seconds to look at your bio. I follow hundreds of
Mhm.
people. I'm already not seeing anyone that I follow, and that's annoying. Tell me in 3 seconds why I should follow
Mhm.
you. And if you can't do that, it's going to be tough to convert people
Yeah.
to a follower.
Yeah, and I love what you said about like the being all over the place, because like I posted this one video clip from this movie which was kind of funny, and that got like 5 million views, but it brought me like I think 5,000 followers.
Mhm.
And then a month later I posted this video of me talking about something which got like 1 million views, but it still brought me 5,000. So one
Wow.
had five
Yeah.
times more the views, but it brought me the same number of followers. I was like,
Wow.
that just goes to show you that like your content has to be relevant to your feed.
Absolutely.
I also love what you said about the hook, because I had post a carousel post where all I did was change the cover and repost it after like 6 months. And the first time it got like 20,000 views. The second time it got like 1 million views just by
Mhm.
changing the first thing. So what do you look? Because I still haven't gotten that down yet. What do you look for when you write a hook? Like what are going through your mind when you write a hook?
Yeah. Um, One is, I'm trying to summarize what the post is going to be about, or what the pain point is of the post, or what is the emotional factor, or the statement, or the fact, or the summary that's going to draw people in to want to know the rest of the post. That's big. But really, when I'm thinking about hooks, there's a few things that I keep in mind. Number one is that negative is the best kind of hook. So, like, the words don't, stop, and
Mm-hmm.
avoid, those are going to grab more attention than neutral hooks. And a neutral hook might just be 7 tips to grow on Instagram, 3 tips for rock climbing. Like, they're neutral. It's not telling you something to do or not to do. It's just kind of a neutral statement, a summary, if you will, of what the post is about. And then surprisingly, positive hooks perform the worst. The things like, post more content, or
Mhm.
3 ways to grow on, 3 tips for more views. Those sorts of things are going to get the least engagement on average, which is really interesting when you think about like the psychology behind that.
Mhm.
Of course, if you're
Or like
overdoing
how to
negative
be
hooks, if
happy.
every yeah, how to be happy. Like if I was to post today 2 carousels, and one was 3 mistakes to avoid in your reels, and the other one was 3 tips to get more views in your reels, they could be the exact same 3 tips, but I guarantee you the one with 3 mistakes to avoid on the hook, that's going to get way more views and engagement, right? Because the caveman brain, the cave person brain is like, I need to pay attention to the one tiger. I don't need to care about the 17 beautiful palm trees and bushes and the cute bunnies over there. I need to pay attention to the one negative thing,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so
I'm gonna
those are going to
clip
grab
this and
attention.
say, "This is why your hooks are not working."
Exactly. Um, yeah, and so I will say, if you're like overdoing, if every post is negative, then it becomes kind of like white noise. Like if every single post is the tiger
Mm.
hiding in the bushes, then like it's gonna become white noise and people aren't gonna pay attention. So you have to find a balance there. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is really dumb it down. Dumb it down. Like make it simple. Stop using fancy vocab and trying to flex your knowledge. Like be so simple. And I catch myself doing this all the time, where I start making these like fancy hooks with like big words that are insider lingo that you would only know if you're already part of the in crowd. You would only know if you already know the post. But that's dumb, because people, once there's a word that they don't understand, we think like, oh, maybe they'll be curious. No, they're not going to be
Mm.
curious. They're going to say, that's a word I don't know. Scroll.
Mm.
And they're going to go right past your post. So really
Mm.
dumb it down, make it very simple, and then keep it short. That's the third thing. Is I usually try to stick to like 8 words or less, because that keeps it concise, it keeps it tight, and it just makes it shorter, so that people are more willing to hear the
Yeah.
whole hook. If your hook is 3 sentences long, someone might scroll,
Yeah.
1 sentence in, and they missed the second and third sentence of the hook. So really trying to keep it short is another key thing that I stick
Yeah.
to.
Those last two things, like dumbing it down and keeping it short, I think if you just practice those two things, I think you actually become better at writing too. Like
Yeah.
just because like, oh, how do I say this long thing in eight words or something like that? It's such a
Yeah.
good exercise. And one thing that I always do is I keep like majority of my audience are overseas, so their English is not their first language. So I'm very mindful of that, and that helps me really like dumb it down.
Yeah.
uh, so I want to talk a little bit about collab. So you do these collab, like any advice or tips on how to do collabs, and how do you personally do like networking? Because I feel like I'll talk to somebody at a party and then I just kind of never talk to them again, or or something like
Yeah,
that.
it's a challenge, for sure. I definitely understand that. I would say that collaboration posts, first and foremost, are awesome. They're a great way to just get exposed to new audiences and to grow your own. And it really just goes back to building genuine, authentic relationships. Pretty much everyone I collaborate with is someone who I truly feel that we have more than just a follower to follower like relationship. Like it's someone who I've been watching their stories. I know that we're
Mm,
aligned on beliefs and values. I know that we have a shared audience with shared ideals. It's someone who I've been watching their Instagram stories, and like I know some personal things about them, and we've become friends more than just collaborators. Now, that's not every time. There are definitely people who come on my podcast and they have a great episode, and I'll collaborate with them on a post to promote the podcast. But I still try to like build that relationship. And I've spent over an hour talking to this person, so we have
mm,
somewhat of a relationship now. But I think of like all these other Instagram coaches and social media experts who I collaborate with. Most of them I've had DMs back and forth with about random stuff that doesn't have to do with Instagram. And then when it comes to actually pitching the collab, what I found most effective, both as the person who's been pitched and the person who's done the pitching, is reach out with a very specific idea. I think a lot of people are hesitant to do this because they think, ooh, I don't want to pitch this person with a specific idea, because what if they don't like it? Or what if they have a different idea? Or what if it feels limiting to them? Well, if one of those 3 things is true, they'll tell you. They'll be like, let's change this. Let's do this a little bit different. And you can even say, hey, if you hate this idea, let's scrap it. Let's come up with something new. But when someone reaches out to me, and this has happened numerous times, and they say, hey, Brock, I'd love to collab with you. Let's do a reel. And I'm like, okay, but like, what are we going to do? And then we get lost in like 3 weeks of back and forth of like, what are we going to do? Let's come up with ideas. Oh yeah, you come up with an idea. I'll look for ideas and we'll get back together. We never get back together. But when someone reaches out and they're like, hey, Brock, I have this idea for a reel. I'm going to say this sentence. You say this sentence. Send me your clip. I'll edit them together and we can post it next Tuesday at 10 a.m. I'm like, done. I'm going to open my camera right now and press record, because they've taken all of the guesswork out. They've made it simple for me. And so the biggest thing that I can recommend for people who are getting into the world of collab posts on social media is reach out to someone who you have a relationship and pitch them with a specific idea for a post.
That's so good. Like I haven't even thought of that, but like you're so right. When I get DMs of people like, "Hey, let's do something together" or something like that, I'm like, "You just gave me work to do. Like now I got to come up with an idea."
Exactly.
Like as opposed to like you're exactly right. Like when somebody says, "Hey, let's do this," or let's like when it's specific, I'm like, "Oh, you just made it so easy for me." Like, oh, that's so good.
Exactly.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about uh, analytics, insights. Do you look at insights at all, data, stuff like that? And so, how do you use that
I
data?
do.
What do you look for?
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I don't think I obsess over it as much as some people do, or as much as some people might think I do. I'm not like combing through my analytics every single day. I really think that the best form of engagement on Instagram is a share. And so the vast majority of my posts are designed to be share worthy. And I'm trying to make my posts in a way that they would be shared with a friend, that they would be shared to your story, that they would be passed along. It's not possible with every post. Some posts are going to be purely promotional or business related. And obviously, I don't expect someone to share that, but I have different goals with those posts. With those posts, I want more comments for direct message automation. And of course, there are also posts that are just purely like educational and valuable. And I recognize that there's a time and place for those that aren't going to be super share worthy. They're going to be very save worthy. But the majority of my posts are share worthy. And so the majority of my content that I'm creating, and when I'm looking at analytics, I'm going back to see what have people shared in the past, and really gaining an understanding of what resonates with my audience, what creates or what leads them to sharing the post. Is it the caption? Is it something in the content? Is it something I said? Is it a certain kind of humor? Or maybe there's no humor. Maybe it's like news or something. Like, what is that share worthy content? That's really the metric I'm paying the most attention to. Views and likes and comments and all that other stuff is really a byproduct, in my opinion, of the shares, because the shares directly lead to more views.
So, from your audience, like what did you notice are the things that get shared the most?
Yes, there's a few things, and I've actually like done a few studies of my own stuff to figure out what is share worthy, and I generally break it down into like 5 different categories of share worthiness. So the first one is what I like to call a call to arms, and I think the most famous example of the call to arms is like the ALS ice bucket challenge back in 2014. Everyone's like dumping buckets of ice on their head to raise money for ALS, and that was we're all in this together. Let's all share and get each other to help out. Those kinds of posts, those calls to arms are super share worthy. Another one is any sort of like breaking news or trending topic or talking about pop culture. I understand not every niche has breaking news, headline news in it. Like maybe you do like, I don't know, essential oils is like your industry. Maybe there's no breaking news in the essential oils industry, but maybe there are ways that you can find the latest Taylor Swift meme and make that, relate pop culture and relate back to your essential oils. Or maybe there's a headline about some toxin that was just discovered in some cleaning supply, and you're going to relate that to how your essential oils don't have toxins or whatever. So that's the second one. The third one is just purely relatable content. And I think that's what I see as most share worthy, is the content that when people see it, they're like, this is so me. Like this is me. This is us. This is like my wife. She sends me reels all day, and she's like, "This is you." And I send her reels all day that are like, "I'm like, this is you," or "This is me," or "This is so us," or "This is so our dog." Like those sorts of relatable humor is very, very share worthy. Inspirational content is share worthy. I would say for me, that's kind of like the least share worthy. But inspirational content is definitely share worthy, because everyone's looking for a little glimpse of hope and encouragement on social media. So inspiring or motivational content. And then last but not least is controversy, Now, I always like to add a disclaimer when I talk about posting controversial content. I am not a fan of, and nor would I ever recommend, posting controversial content just for the sake of controversy,
Mm,
nor would I recommend posting controversial content because you're trying to get canceled, or you're trying to piss people off or make people mad, or you're trying to step on toes and you're trying to, be rude. Like, that's not what I'm encouraging here. But what I am encouraging is those quote unquote unpopular opinions that we all have, sharing those, talking about the
mhm,
things that, hey, I think most people in my niche or most industry leaders in my space, they always talk about this, but I think that this other thing is true. Like,
mhm,
I'm totally making up what I'm saying right now, but like let's say I was a rock climber, and let's say everyone in the rock climbing industry is like, you got to join a gym. Joining a gym is the only way to get better at rock climbing. But I totally disagree. I'm like,
mhm,
no, screw the gyms. What, you're climbing on plastic and you're falling on
mhm,
mats? That's going to teach you bad habits. Instead,
mhm,
you need to go out in the real world. You need to climb real rocks. That's how you're going to get better at rock climbing. Like, I don't know, maybe that's my
yeah,
unpopular opinion. That's my controversial thought. Posting about those things is highly share worthy
yeah,
because the people who agree, which you'll be surprised how many people do agree, how popular your
yeah,
unpopular opinion is,
yeah,
those people are like, yes,
yeah,
finally someone
yeah,
said it. Finally someone said what I believe in,
yeah.
and then they share it. They
They're
pass it
share.
along because it's a way that they can like say it without having to directly say it. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? So yeah, that controversial
So
content is
good.
the fifth type of share worthy stuff.
Yeah. Like as you're going through all the five different things, I'm like, oh, like I'm thinking in my head, like the ones that got Cheryl, like I'm like, oh, that's the one. That's like, it's so
Hmm.
like I had the one that got like a million views was like, I talked about personality, like this type of personality does this, and this type of personality does this, and if you look at the comments, I'm like, oh, I'm so type A, or I'm type B, or
Yeah,
something like that,
yeah.
like, um what do you think is I want to now get into kind of your personal opinions and like your personal side. What do you think is harder, growing Instagram or growing a business?
I think growing a business is harder. I do. I think there's a lot more nuances. I think there's a lot more intricacies. I think you could have one reel go viral and suddenly you've grown an Instagram. It's pretty tough to have a, like a product go viral, or like if you sell a service, have your coaching packages go viral. So I think it's much easier to build an Instagram than a business.
What do you think are some of your on the last episode we talked about kind of like what I think your strengths are and all of that. What do you think are some of your weaknesses?
I think I have a few. I think I have quite a few. I am a recovering perfectionist, and those perfectionist tendencies still creep up from time to time. It's something that I have a real tough time balancing, and I often err on the side of posting things with mistakes and posting things with errors, and I'm kind of known for like my typos, and that's because I'm actively trying to fight against my own perfectionist
Mm,
tendencies. My people pleaser tendencies are also still around, and they've been around my whole life, and it's something that I still deal with, is um, wanting to just keep everyone happy and not step on any toes and not piss anyone off, and it affects me when people don't like me, which is weird because I have a lot of followers, and so that means I also have a lot of haters, and I have a lot of people who
mm,
don't like me, and so getting used to that is definitely a challenge. Um, and then I think comparison is something that I still struggle with myself. Is like, I can remember it was November of last year. I was meeting with a potential brand who I was going to partner with, and we were going back and forth about rates, which is already something that I don't feel super comfortable talking about. Like, I'd much rather just email you my rates, and if you have a different proposed rate, email me back. I don't want to hop on a call and talk face to face about rates. Um, but the guy hopped on a call with me, and he pulled up one of my reels and was like, "Look how many views you got. Like, do you really think you're worth this rate?" And I ended up not doing the deal with him because like that was super unprofessional and like very uncomfortable for me. And he started scrolling through my stuff and being like, "Look how many views you got. Look how many likes you got. Like, we paid this person who's getting double your views this much, so we should only pay you this much." And that stuck with me for months. And for months, I was like in this place of thinking about my content, being like kind of maybe not embarrassed, but aware, self conscious, I
mm,
guess, of my views or my engagement. And so it's a struggle. It's something that I'm way better at now than when I was 21. But all of those things I just listed are definitely still something I struggle with.
So on the last time we talked, you talked a little towards the end. You talked about you're like a big supporter or proponent of therapy. Um,
Mm-hmm.
what are some of the things? So do you want to talk a little bit about that? Like what, how has therapy helped you? What are
Yeah.
is this regarding some of these areas? You know.
Yeah, absolutely. So like I said a second ago, I said like when I was 21 and before I was 21, I struggled with these things a lot more. That 21 was not just a random number I pulled out of a hat. That was really when I did like a deep dive in therapy. I think I was like 20 or 21 years old. Um, really intensive therapy. I was dealing with some stuff in my personal life that uh, was really throwing a wrench in my perfect life plan that I had laid out for myself. And so I did intensive therapy for it was EMDR therapy for anyone looking for the
Mm-mm.
very specific kind of therapy. So that's like the bouncing
I've
light
been
or the
hearing of
follow
that.
the
Yeah.
pen type of therapy. Um, and people can research that. I'm definitely not an expert. I couldn't explain it. But I did intensive hours and hours of EMDR therapy multiple times a week for a couple months to help kind of detach from a lot of these narratives I had in my head and a lot of these stories I've told myself and a lot of these tendencies that I had adopted and really cemented throughout my childhood. And so, yeah, there's a lot of unlearning that had to take place. And before my wife and I got married, we did couples therapy for months to even though we had a great relationship and we still have a great relationship, it was important for both of us to sit down and to work through those childhood traumas and to work through those um, challenges that every couple faces. And so I'm a huge proponent of therapy, and there's so many things that I use on a daily basis now that I don't even think about as being from therapy. That if I traced them back to where they stemmed from, there were things I learned in therapy.
What are some examples of those things that that you
Yeah.
use?
Off the top of my head, I think just recognizing the stories that we tell ourselves and the weight that they have is important. And I think a lot of people feel like, I think, therefore I am, and they don't realize that their thoughts are not permanent. Their thoughts are not always their own. Their thoughts might have been planted in them because of something that your mom said to you when you were 8. Your
Mm,
thoughts might be planted in your head because of something a coach said to you when you were 6, a teacher said to you when you were 12, and like those sorts
mm,
of things. So I think reframing the story I'm telling myself, and even just using that framing, like I'll tell my wife that sometimes, like if we're in a disagreement and I'm feeling defensive, I might say to her, the story I'm telling myself right now is that
mm.
you are mad at me because I'm not good enough, something like that. Like I'm gonna explain it, and instead of saying I feel, or you are mad, you're being a
Oh,
whatever,
you actually
the
say that
story I'm
to her?
telling myself. Yeah, I'll actually say that to her, and that's a practice that I wouldn't say the second thing, but like the story I'm telling myself thing is something I'll say to myself, and it's something that I'll say to her, and she'll say back to me, because it's just important to help reframe the way we're thinking. Um, Also, just like understanding my own tolerances, and there's this thing that I learned from one of my therapists that was like the window of tolerance, and like we all have different windows. Some of us, our windows are just
Mm,
barely cracked open and we're always on edge, and some of us have really wide open windows and we're much more calm and steady. And so just learning like what my window of tolerance is, and the things that can affect that, like
mm,
learning to set boundaries and be like,
mm,
hey, I just got done with a 3-hour training. I need 30 minutes to just
mm.
sit and scroll through TikTok. Like I can't hop into something else right now. And just um, learning to get to know myself better and what I need better, and being able to speak up for what I need better is a constant practice, but something that,
Yeah.
again, I think I learned in therapy.
Yeah, it's good because like from the stories that I heard from you, and like if I just see your content, like I would never guess that, oh, this guy needs therapy or something like that. But
Yeah.
it's because I got you're absolutely right. I see people that, let's say, they've just never really achieved anything, and how that is like a childhood trauma. But on the opposite, I've also seen like high performers who's always done great, and they feel
Mhm.
the pressure to always do that, and they get trauma from that. So it's like
Yeah.
it doesn't matter how great your childhood was or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's definitely part of it. Like you have to recognize that both of those things can be true. I had an amazing, extremely privileged childhood. I was raised by a wealthy family with 2 loving parents who remained married and stayed married. And both of my grandparents on both sides are married, and we had a healthy family, and we had like no major like addictions or criminal backgrounds or like anything. There was no like type capital A abuse or capital T trauma. Like I wasn't beat as a child. I wasn't having like my family wasn't living paycheck to paycheck. I never had to worry about where my next meal was from. But at the same time, there were still lowercase t, quote unquote, traumas, which are things that affect us all because at the end of the day, every single human is messed up. And so when we all get together with another human and then we make more humans, even the best parents are going to influence their kids in some way. So it's not to say that your parents were bad parents or they didn't try their best. It's just that they aren't perfect. Nobody's perfect. They aren't perfect. And so they made mistakes. And those mistakes oftentimes continue to affect us into our adulthood. So I don't care who you are. I don't care how great you are, what you've achieved. I think everyone needs at least a little bit of therapy.
Yeah, I think that's reassuring to hear that we, like we're not perfect, and just we have to know that. And the so if that guy that you talked about that negotiating rates with you, like if you were to talk to that guy again, how would you react today? Like how would it be different?
I don't know if it would be any different. I might just like end the call right there because I know I'm not going to work with that guy, and I know if I'm in that situation again, like I'm just ending the call. But even at that time, like I just kind of like nodded, and I think I even pushed back a little bit, which was like, yeah, well, my views might not be as high as that person, but if you look, I have more comments, and the comments are what are leads, and leads are what you want for your business, and that sort of thing. But especially knowing now that like the end was, hey, I'm not working with you. Like this is very unprofessional. This is very uncalled for. I might just end the call right there and be like, see you, man. Like I'm ghosting you. Like goodbye. We're done.
I had cases like that a lot, and a lot of times I realize it's like also trauma on their end, because like sometimes people
Yeah.
come to you trying to, like, they have their mask on, they're trying to battle. So if I've had clients like do that, and what I learned is now the way when somebody does that to me and they're like, hey, you see this, your view's not good, all day, like they clearly came prepared to battle.
Yeah.
And I'll just accept it. I'll just say, yeah, you're right. You're right about everything. And
Yeah.
usually when I did that, like that actually gets their defense down, and they're
Very
actually
true.
more open to talk.
Yeah,
That's
that's
one of
very
the things
true.
I
I think
realized.
I've seen Alex Hormozy talk about that before. Is like no matter what you call him, it reminds me of like the rap battle from 8 Mile where Eminem's like, I am a bum. I do live in a trailer park with my mom. It's like it takes their power away when you're like, yeah, I am. And so that's something that I try to practice. It's not always easy, but I definitely try to practice when people are like, you have a team. That's why you're able to do so much, bringing this conversation back full circle. And I'll be like, yeah, I do have a team or whatever, like just accepting and being like, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
It really shuts people down.
So I'm always shocked whenever you talk about like hate comments or negative comments, which I think they're two different things: negative comments versus hate
Yeah,
comments.
I agree.
Um, I can't because like when I see your content, I can't possibly imagine like what can you possibly hate about this guy, right? You're just so not like you're not provocative, you're not controversial, you're like in every sense. So first of all, that just kind of made me realize, okay, it doesn't matter who you are, you're gonna get
Yeah,
hate.
yeah,
And how do you deal with it?
yeah. Well, I really appreciate
Both
that first
separately,
and
negative
foremost.
versus
Yeah, yeah,
hate.
and I really appreciate the compliment. I do definitely, and it's the people pleaser in me that tries not to be controversial. I'll give you an example. Later today, I have a meme that's like Donald Trump sitting staring at his phone, and I use that for a meme. But in the post, I have like a second slide that's like Kamala Harris as a meme herself, because I was like, I don't want anyone to be like, I'm getting political, I'm supporting one person or the other. Like, hey, I got both of them in this post, both of them in this meme, and I think my caption is literally, please don't make this political. Like it's just funny. Come on, people. Can we just be funny here? Um, so I appreciate
That's
that.
good.
And it's definitely the people pleaser in me that tries to keep things less risque and less controversial. And I also agree that there's a difference between negative comments and hate comments. I think a negative comment can be very useful. I think a negative comment can be things that are critical or that are even criticism or things that are just feedback on what you're posting, and those can be very helpful. Like those can be as much as they hurt, as much as you might be like, oh, this person's wrong, they're an idiot, they don't get it. It can be very helpful, and I get stuff like that I don't want to say all the time, but every once in a while, I'll get people who are giving me feedback on my podcast or on my content. And I try to take down the defensive walls and appreciate that, hey, this person cares so much about following me or consuming my content that they're willing to give this critical suggestion. They're willing to give this quote unquote negative feedback. A hater is obviously very different. A hater is like, you're ugly, you're fat, you're a loser, this is a waste of time, you're an idiot. Those people, I usually just laugh. I don't care. If it's like super, super mean, I might block the person. I might delete the person. The one thing that I will not allow is when people are being hateful to other people in my comments section. I don't allow that. So if like one person's going after another person, no, that's not cool. That's not allowed in my community. You're getting blocked. You're getting deleted. I might start by messaging you. Like if it's not that bad of an offense, I might message you and be like, hey, please stop. Like this isn't cool. But if someone in my community is really going after someone else, they might just get blocked. They might just get removed altogether. I don't deal with a ton of it myself. Honestly, I really don't. I don't get a ton of hate comments. It's usually just on the viral posts that end up getting hate comments, and I don't check the comments of viral posts. And that's something I tell people is when you have a post that starts going viral, stop checking the comments because you're going to get 500. It's going to be too many to keep up with. And there's going to be a handful in there that are just trolls who are living in the basement and who are cussing you out and calling you names just because they have nothing better to do. And so I stay out of the viral comment sections.
And you're right. Like you just made me realize, actually, like hate comments bother me a lot less than the actual negative comments that are true.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really interesting. Okay, thank you. So I mean, I think I feel like I can just keep asking you questions, but I want to be respectful of your time. Thank you so much. It's really reassuring to hear, like, all of these things that like you're just a human being at the end of the day, obviously, and that you go through the same thing that we all go through, obviously. Yeah. So Instaclub Hub, if somebody wants to join, is there anything else you want to quickly share about? Where can they find you if you want them to join something?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you for having me on the show. And I love being on this podcast. It was a reason that I said absolutely yes to coming back on a second time, is because this is such a great show. And I think you do such an excellent job of being conversational and asking great questions that feel conversational, but still get at the important topics and that dive right into the deep stuff. And so I really appreciate you for having me, and I appreciate just your skills and your energy and your attentiveness as an interviewer. So thank you for having me. If anyone wants to follow me, it's Brock11 Johnson, Brock11 Johnson on all socials. Instagram is the best place though to get connected. If they DM me on Instagram, they'll probably get a response from myself or at least my community manager. You'll get a response. And then, yeah, the Instaclub Hub is basically my Instagram membership where I help people grow and monetize Instagram. And there's a trial for that, which is instaclubhub.com/trial if someone wants to check it out for 2 weeks. And so that's usually where I direct people to. That's really my only offer. So that's where I send people.
Awesome. I'll put all the links in the bottom. Thank you again for your time, and I'll see you and I'll see everyone. Cheers.